we're very aware that a lot of the hospitality industry has been taken right to the cliff edge in the past 12 months. And we want to make sure that their experience with the Australian Open is a positive one and can help, in some cases, get their business back on track and really help in a positive way. So most of our commercial arrangement, the risk does sit with us.
Today on Dirty Linen's Summer Series, we are talking sport. And when we talk sport and Melbourne, I guess we talk about something that is interwoven into the city's life. It encompasses entertainment, it encompasses food and beverage, it's social, and of course, we love to have some sport in there amongst it as well. So our victim today is Ben Slack, for the Chief Revenue Officer from Tennis Australia. Ben is leading up to the Australian Open, delayed due to COVID, but very much happening, but in different form. So Ben, Chief Revenue Officer for the Australian Open, that sounds like a massive job. Can you give us a bit of a sense of what it is that you do?
Well, our team is responsible for quite a few things across the Australian Open and more broadly Tennis Australia. I suppose when it comes to the actual event and what we're putting on, we're responsible for working with all of our partners and sponsors around the world, our broadcasters and media partners, but then also our experience on the site, what we're doing across the site, who we're working with, and of course, selling those experiences and selling those tickets to the fun-loving public that like to enjoy the Australian Open over the few weeks that we hold it here in Melbourne.
So, I mean, I love the tennis. I love going to it. I think it's a really fantastic event for Melbourne. And I love, that Melbourne has these big events. Well, apart from the Grand Prix, which I hate, but I do love the tennis. And one of the things I love about it is that it's this really well-resourced playground, like innovation opportunity for food and beverage. Of course, this year the tennis is so different. Can you talk about some of the challenges that you've had in bringing those experiences or planning for those experiences for the public this year?
Well, you're right. I mean, we do like to see it as a bit of a playground with lots of different forms of entertainment. And we set out many years ago to ensure that it was exactly that. And it wasn't just about the tennis, albeit that's at the heart of it, being a Grand Slam. You're right. This has been it's been a significant year of planning, and what we've got ahead of us will be different to what we've seen in any other year. What you'll see in particular is on the site alone, you'll see three hard zones, which we break up the precinct into, and when you buy a ticket into one of those zones, where we've got our three main arenas located, you have to stay within that zone, and you can't go across into other zone. And that's I suppose one of the things that we've put in place to ensure that the safety of our patrons and staff and players who are working and performing at the Australian Open, and working very closely with the Department of Health and Victorian Government to ensure that we are having a COVID-safe tennis events with lots of people on site. And it also gives us the ability that should something hairy go wrong, and there is a community transmission, we can contact trace those people within those zones on any particular day, on any particular session, and we know that where they've been. So I suppose that's been a particular challenge from an operational point of view, but then, of course, what we do with that from an experience and how we have to ensure that the experience in those three zones is up to par and it's synonymous with what the Australian Open has become known for the past few years.
Yeah, well, I went to the Boxing Day test and there was that similar zoning where you could only stick to your bay, and it was, that system seemed to work when there was a case at the cricket on, I think it was day 2, and I was camping, and someone at the campsite where I was, they got the text message, they needed to get tested, they went back to Melbourne, got tested, so it seemed like that system worked really well. So I guess at least that part of it's been a little bit road tested. But there aren't as many hospitality experiences at the cricket as there are at the Australian Open. So what are some of the things that you're doing to ensure that people can still have an interesting experience?
Look, it was something that was really important. It was a bit of a guiding principle when we set out to when we committed to putting the Australian Open on this year. we were going to do it without a compromise to the experience, as I mentioned before. Uh, Interestingly enough, when we actually had to start planning for the zones, we did it in a very short period of time. It was late in the play in which we worked in with the Victorian government, and this was the direction that we were going. And we had to effectively transform the entire site. We know that if someone's coming into a particular zone, that experience needs to be up to par with what we've done. And so it's almost like three miniature events within the one. You come in here and you experience the food and the music and of course the tennis as well. So what you'll actually see across those three zones is a consistent approach with the different food vendors and dining and retailers that we're working across. And that's been a lot of planning that's gone into that over that time.
So with so much extra stuff that you need to do and to plan for, and I assume, well, obviously with no international tourism, with restricted domestic tourism, people can't come from every single part of the country at this point. And I'm sure people are nervous about going into state given border closures. Is it still possible to run a profitable event?
It's a good question. It is very difficult. It does make it a lot harder to do so. And I think you're effectively building a lot of temporary infrastructure on site for the 2 weeks of the event. Now, you would know that the hospitality industry is running off pretty skinny margins at the best of times. And when you're actually starting to build the structures and the facilities that you're operating in, that can make it even more difficult. And I suppose you overlay that where we had to plan out where the restaurants and the dining experiences that we're putting on site, we weren't sure whether it was going to have to be a 1-4 or 1-2 square metres. And so we actually did model our profitability off that basis. But look, we're not making as much money as previous years, and I think that's been no secret that we've been pretty upfront about. But at the same time, we knew that if it was really important not only to maintain the Grand Slam status of the Australian Open, but also just to protect the brand of the premium nature of this event, we committed to putting this on. We said that we would do that with our partners and broadcasters, and we feel that's really important for the community here in Melbourne and broader Victoria, that we continue that and put it on for the next few years, and we didn't want to miss a year.
It's interesting when you talk about, the reputation and the way that the Open's perceived in the community, because, I mean, as I said, I love the tennis, but I have to say I've got mixed feelings about tennis players and their entourages jetting in from around the world from some, real COVID-riddled locations. We know that there's hotel quarantine, but it has been controversial, and some of the pampered tennis players perhaps aren't striking the right tone with the Victorian public, who've fought very hard to have zero community transmission. How's that all played out from your perspective?
Look, I can understand some of those thoughts and feelings in the community. I mean, Melbourne and broader Victoria and Australia has had a very challenging 12 months. And being a Melbourne person myself, I certainly didn't enjoy being in lockdown for many months. It's been a huge logistical exercise to get it's about 1,000 people over here, which includes players and entourage, and also some critical staff members, whether they be umpires or broadcast staff. We chartered 17 flights from a few different locations around the world, and we filled those planes with those players and the support staff that I just mentioned to about 20 to 25%. What's really important, and I think it's it's really important for the general public to understand, is that they were incremental flights and chartered flights at our cost, and we certainly didn't take up any positions for anyone trying to get back home into Australia. I think that's the first point. And also the second is it's a very strict and disciplined quarantine program. Some of the players can come out for between 4 and 5 hours to practice and train. These are athletes that need to be conditioning before they go into a Grand Slam. But in some cases where there have been positive cases as they've actually entered into the country, then those flights where there might be close contacts have gone into hard lockdown, to protect the the community here, and so that there's no outbreaks into the community. So it's really important. We tested players as they got on a plane, and they needed to test negative, and then again when they arrived here in Australia, and we continue to do so over a 2 to 3 week period. So. Look, we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't have the support of the Victorian government, working in very closely with the Department of Health and ensuring that we were very confident that this was going to be a safe event for everyone. And that's what gave us the confidence to put this on. I hear what you're saying in terms of the general public with some opinions on the players, and I think that it's unfortunate that there's been a few players that have spoken out over the past week. But I think it's a minority. And if you talk to the players, most of them understand the position they're in and the amount of effort that's gone into this from not only ourselves, but also the Victorian government. And they appreciate what Melbourne and Victorians in particular have gone through. And they're not dismissive of that. They've been invited over here and they're locking down and they're following the rules. And they'll come out and play some great tennis, and they want to put on that showcase for Melbourne and Victoria. And I think that you'll start to see how important that is for both them and what how much they love Australia. And I think it's a few players that unfortunately have painted a picture for some of the larger cohort.
I mean, one of the things that I wonder is whether the ones who've been in hard lockdown and have less time on the court, I guess the reason that they want to be practicing is so that they can play better. Will there be a sort of diminished outcome for the Open when some of these players that have been in a hard lockdown, perhaps they can't perform in the way that they'd want to? Is it an Open that's not really going to be able to be played at full speed?
Well, we as you know, and most people know that this year's Australian Open will effectively commence on the 8th of February for the main draw. And that's 3 weeks later than what a normal year or what it was originally planned to be. And the reason we did that was we don't want the players to come out straight away after quarantine and go straight into the main draw of a Grand Slam. And we made sure that there was a week in between there where we have a number of lead-in events, or what we refer to as the Melbourne Summer Series and the ATP Cup. And that's a series of both men and women's professional events that all the players will get an opportunity to get match time in, and all of the players that have been in hard lockdown as well will also have a number of days to prepare going into that. So I think that you'll see that the standard of tennis is still up there for a Grand Slam once it commences on the 8th of February.
Great. And how are ticket sales going?
Ticket sales, it's been interesting. Look, we normally go on sale in October of the year prior to the Australian Open, and we actually didn't go on sale just because we didn't know what we were working with, and we were still working with the Victorian government on approval of plans until a few days out before Christmas. Interestingly enough, and I think it was because of pent-up demand, the first 24 hours was actually our strongest sales or day of sales ever on record that we've got going back. As you'd expect over Christmas and New Year's, it's always a bit softer as people take a bit of a break and they're not really thinking about that type of thing. And then it picked up again in January when people started to sort of come back online. The last week, it's been a little softer as a result of what's been playing out, but we've started to see that pick up in the last 24 to 48 hours in particular. In actual fact, we went on sale yesterday with an exhibition, a day at the drive, for Adelaide. That's where the players that have come into Adelaide will play on Friday the 29th, about a week from now, and those tickets sold out within 30 minutes. So we know that there's still interest there. We expect that to pick up, and I think that there will be still a lot of people coming down to the Australian Open this year.
What proportion of the crowd ordinarily is local?
Well, we have about 65% of it on a normal year. Comes from Victoria, Melbourne or Greater Victoria, and then you've probably got about 15% are international, and the remainder are interstate. So, look, that's obviously going to be very, very different this particular year. We have seen some bookings from interstate, but it's been slower than what you would expect. It was certainly higher before Christmas when And then obviously, we've had some lockdowns, some interstate border restrictions. So we're just waiting to see how that plays out over the next few weeks. But hopefully we can start to see that being relaxed like we are at the moment.
And what about corporates? I mean, I guess, corporate hospitality has really been put on pause for almost a year now. Do you find that some of the local companies, are wanting to do things for their staff and their clients?
We are seeing it. It still exists. It's definitely less than a normal year. There's no doubt about it. And there's people that are hesitant to do that, or whether their guests want to be coming to an event and being mindful of that. So it's less than a normal year, but it's still, it's probably where we expected it to be. In fact, probably sort of tracking a little bit better than that. We are being mindful of what it looks like across the eastern seaboard with border restrictions, and we've got a lot of clientele that come from New South Wales and Queensland in particular, and that's a bit of a risk at the moment. But what we actually did is that, knowing that these, or if you call them barriers or reservations about coming to a major event like that, we actually designed some products to help counter that, or make people feel more comfortable in those types of settings. So, whether it be private dining pods on Grand Slam Oval, or even champagne cabanas on Garden Square, and even you'll see a lot more al fresco type dining. People want space, more open areas. We're seeing people come back to the restaurant and cafe industry here in Melbourne, but they want that a little bit of that extra space. And I think those products is helped counter that, and still get that corporate market, or people who still wanting to entertain at a major event.
Well, Champagne Cabana, I feel like that was designed for me. That sounds really good. Ben, in the past, I've done stories on the Australian Open, and I've loved talking to your chefs about the vast scale of the event and the enormous quantity of produce that is used. Have you got any cool stats that you can share on that?
Yeah, you're right. We always like to, tell you how many potatoes have gone into tons of potatoes have gone into our chips, or something like that. Look, we're doing a bit of modelling on what we think and how we'll play it out. Obviously, we've still got a few weeks to go, but I mean, ultimately, I think across the entire 2 weeks of the tournament, we're anticipating that we'll serve over 60,000 dishes to our guests on site, which is, and if you think about the fact that we'll be around about half the crowd that we normally have, that's still remarkable. But the scale is quite significant. So 60,000 dishes, and just to put that into perspective for you, we're working with about almost 2,000 hospitality staff that'll be employed over the 2 weeks as well, that to deliver these F&B experiences over the 2 weeks. Lunch and dinner across there. So it's going to be quite a few, and it's going to be quite big. And I'm looking forward to counting how many tons of potatoes that we do go through at the appropriate time. But who knows what it'll be at this particular stage.
Yeah, sure. Well, it was actually my first summer job out of school, was working at the AO selling ice cream. And I have to say, I did sell a lot of ice cream. It was a great job, and it is such an important annual employment opportunity for a lot of hospitality staff. So yeah, it's great to know that you're still employing a lot of people. One thing I've always wondered, Ben, is about who holds the risk if you're a hospitality operator who's being brought into the Australian Open, whether it's to run a restaurant or to run a stand. Like, what is the commercial arrangements between the Australian Open and those parties?
Well, we work with a number of different chefs and talent and food operators. I mean, to give you an idea of that scale, we've got about 10 renowned chefs that we're working with, whether it be our well-known chef series through to restaurants on site. We're working with another 10 local food outlets for a lot of the retail experiences, whether it be Hero or the Israeli Miznon. And we're actually working with about 150 local producers across the state. In actual fact, a lot of the conversations with these talent and caterers and chefs is that we wanted to mandate that they use this, amazing produce from our Victorian food bowl. So there's quite vast range of people that we're working with in a variety of different capacities. Every single commercial relationship is different. We have a couple of major caterers that we work with who are doing a lot of our on-site mass delivery. And then we're working with very small operators that might be operating out of a smaller food truck, for example. So they're so vastly different. We've structured most of our commercial arrangements in a way that there's very little risk. We're very aware that a lot of the hospitality industry has been taken right to the cliff edge in the past 12 months, and we want to make sure that their experience with the Australian Open is a positive one, and can help in some cases get their business back on track and really help in a positive way. So most of our commercial arrangement, the risk does sit with us, but of course they differ across all of them. And I think that the way that we've modelled it, we've been quite conservative with the patronage or the volume of patronage on site. I think that everyone's going to come out on top, which is great.
Okay, so yeah, it is really exciting, some of the talent that you've got on board. So just to rattle off a few names, we've got Charlie Carrington, who's doing an Australian themed menu. I'm really excited to see that Mark Briggs from Sardine in Gippsland is coming along to do one of the Chef Series events, as well as Michael Ryan from Provenance in Beechworth and Phil Wood from Laura on the Mornington Peninsula. It's great to see those regional Victorian chefs given some prominence, and I suppose there is more of an opportunity to highlight local talent in a year such as this.
This year was a great opportunity, not only to showcase local talent and chefs and restaurants, but we're actually going to be talking about the tomatoes as much as the tennis balls. We're actually going to be talking a lot about this great food bowl and the local produce as well. So when we've been working in with all of the talent, making sure that they are working with the local producers. So the Chef Series in particular, always very exciting. This is the 5th year that we've been working on it. You made reference to Mark Briggs from Sardine Eatery and Michael Ryan from Beechworth. But so too for Phil Wood from Point Leo Estates and Joe Barrett as well, formerly from Oak Ridge Winery. And then when we're working with these guys, it's about what are they heroing. So, Michael Ryan will be working with Trout from Harrietville. Charlie Carrington, really looking forward to him for the first time ever having an Australian-themed offering. And he'll be sort of bringing in sort of great local produce from Lake Entrance and the Octopus. So it's all of these types of things. It's not just about working with Charlie or Mark. It's about what are they doing and what other produce are we heroing through that experience.
Love it. Well, Ben, I really wish you and the whole team the best with putting on a successful and COVID-safe Australian Open. It certainly is a funny one that we will not forget, but hopefully we'll remember it for all the right reasons. But thank you so much for sharing so much insight into the event and the enormous planning effort with me today.
No problem. Well, thanks, Dani, and hopefully we see you down at one of the Champagne Cabanas in Garden Square soon.
Yeah, I'll just need one just with my name on it permanently for the duration.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Cheers. Bye.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about. We spend a week thrashing around each issue, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.
It's a really tricky one because, from a government point of view, I can